Hello, my name is Carolyn DeVito. I am the Assistant Executive Director of the Montclair Community Pre-K in Montclair, New Jersey.
Hi, and I'm Susan Bryant Gaither, and I am the Family Services Director at the Montclair Community Pre-K.
In this module, Susan and I will talk about the responsibility to report suspicions of maltreatment. We will provide an overview of what you should expect if you make a call to the Child Abuse Hotline. Next, we will discuss how internal reporting policies at your school or institution do not supersede your responsibility as a mandated reporter. And finally, we present some challenges that may come with deciding whether or not your suspicions meet the threshold to call the hotline. The safety, health, and welfare of children in the state of New Jersey is every resident's responsibility. We are all mandated reporters. As individuals who work with children, we have an added obligation to protect the children in our care. Being a mandated reporter means that any time we see or have a strong suspicion of child abuse or neglect, it is our duty to notify the authorities. Reports do not have to include definitive proof, but do need reasonable cause. As a mandated reporter, you are not required to determine whether abuse or neglect has occurred. However, you do need to report a reasonable suspicion. Abuse is often more apparent than neglect. It is easier to make a call when you're aware of injuries or a child has disclosed maltreatment. In other situations, a suspicion may be less clear. For example, a child who is left alone at home may be the victim of neglect. Neglect is often harder to identify than abuse, even though it is the most common type of maltreatment. Remember, your responsibility is not to verify maltreatment, but to make a report if you have a reasonable suspicion.
Be prepared to provide as much information as you can when making a call to the hotline. You'll be asked to share your name, the child's name and age, names of the parents, caregivers, and the type of relationship you have with the family. The information you share about yourself, including your name and place of employment, will be kept confidential at the time of the call. It's important to provide up-to-date information about the child and their family, including where the child lives, the parent's place of employment, any other contact information. You may also be asked to relay any information that the child has shared with you, including a description of what happened and who was involved. You may also be asked if this is the first time you have seen any injuries or whether this is the first time you have suspected maltreatment. Remember that by calling the hotline, you are potentially protecting the child from harm, and your call may help connect the family with additional support or services they need to provide for their child.
Each school or child care may have internal policies about how their staff should communicate concerns about maltreatment to their supervisors. However, these policies cannot interfere with any individual's responsibility to report suspected maltreatment. Some institutions prefer that an administrator make the call to the hotline. If this is the case, the teacher or staff person who has firsthand knowledge of the concern should be present because the caseworker will need to speak directly with that individual. Other institutions may prefer that the teacher or staff person make the call on their own. Either way, the call must be made, and the person who has knowledge of the situation needs to be available to speak to the hotline caseworker. It is important to note that if a supervisor is unavailable, you should still make the call, regardless of your institution's internal policies. Remember, as a mandated reporter, you are to report suspicions or knowledge of maltreatment immediately. And immediately means right now, not when your supervisor returns from a meeting or vacation.
At times, there may be a conflict about whether a call should be made. The administration may feel the incident or suspicions do not warrant a call to the hotline, but the teacher or staff believes a call is necessary. A teacher or staff person has every right and responsibility to make the call to the hotline. We cannot emphasize enough that you are a mandated reporter, which means you must notify the hotline anytime you see or have a strong suspicion of child maltreatment. We realize there are challenges to making a report. You might question whether the parent will know it was you who called, or what will happen if you are wrong. Will the child get into trouble? However, you must remember that there are dangers to the child in not making a report. You might think someone else will make the call, but that isn't always the case. Remember, it's not your responsibility to determine if abuse or neglect has occurred. Your responsibility is to report a reasonable suspicion. By reporting, you allow trained professionals to make the decision on if and how to proceed. All reports made in good faith are protected by law and cannot be held against the employee. Also, keep in mind that any member of the school's faculty or staff who knowingly fails to report their suspicions of maltreatment may face legal consequences. You are the voice for children who may not be able to speak for themselves. It is our responsibility to promote a child's well-being and report suspected maltreatment to the hotline.